New HDB flats will be built on this field in Farrer Park while retaining some of its sporting heritage. Going up and up, inflation jumps to a 10-year high driven by rising prices of food and services. Returning to the office tomorrow, we'll take a look at how the pandemic has changed people's views of their workplace. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story with me, Hairianto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss a single episode. Around 1,600 new HDB flats will be built on a 10-hectare site in Farrer Park and integrated with sports and recreational facilities, including a new sports centre. The BTO flats are slated to be launched for sale in the next 3 years. The site, about the size of 19 football fields, is bounded by Dorset Road, Kingley Road, Hampshire Road and Racecourse Road. In a nod to the area's rich sporting heritage, about 20% of the site will be set aside as open spaces for sports and recreational uses. While the former boxing gym building, which used to be the training ground for the Singapore Amateur Boxing Association, will be retained and repurposed, the Farrer Park swimming complex will not be kept. Sports correspondent Sazali Abdul Aziz joins me now. Saz, the area is known for its rich sporting heritage. Remind us of what the Farrer Park site was like before.
Yeah, indeed, it was a hub for sporting activity for Singapore all the way back from the 1930s actually, and all the way through to even the 90s. With its heyday being in the 1970s before the National Stadium opened in 1973. Most notably, there was the swimming pool, the Farrer Park swimming pool, and a boxing gym, and the Farrer Park Athletic Centre. There was also the sports house, which housed the offices of the National Sports Associations, before the National Stadium, and then now the Sports Hub became home for most of where the NSAs are. In more recent years, it's been an area for more sort of like community sports and recreational sports. Frisbee, cricket, some social football games, and Ang Peng Siong's swimming school is still at that swimming complex. So yeah, it's been related with sports for at least 60-70 years.
When it was announced in 2018 that the site would be redeveloped into a residential area, many sports people were saddened by the news and called for the sporting heritage there to be retained. What have the reactions been so far to today's announcement of the development plans?
I think overall, many people have welcomed the plans. The URA has announced that 20% of the area would be allocated for either sports or recreational use. I think there is a tinge of sadness from people knowing that the pool is no longer sustainable. It will be demolished, and then a new sports center with a new pool will be built in its place, as well as the tennis courts, which will be completely demolished and have, I believe, HDB blocks built over it. But there is obviously a reason to cheer as well with the preservation of the boxing gym into some kind of space for the community.
Do you think the plans will help to once again reignite the sporting spirit in the area?
I don't know, reignite, because like I said, we have developed, in recent decades, new spaces for sport in Singapore, most notably the Sports Hub and, the upcoming Kallang Alive precinct. But it will certainly preserve the history and the heritage, as you mentioned earlier, of Farrer Park. I'm sure there'll be many memorials and reminders to the past as to what this place meant to Singaporeans. Of course, it holds a special place for many Singaporeans, and I think the URA is doing justice to it with its plans.
Thank you for your insights, sports correspondent Sazali Abdul Aziz. With all workers allowed to return to their workplaces from tomorrow, it appears that some people would rather not be in the office all the time. According to a new report by the Institute of Policy Studies, about half of the respondents surveyed felt that flexible work arrangements should be the new norm for workplaces in Singapore. Around 4 in 10 also felt that employees should be allowed to work from home 3 days a week. And half of those polled said that they learned new skills during the pandemic that would help them in their careers.
So in short, the findings show that preferred work arrangements have shifted throughout the pandemic. So now more people feel that flexible work arrangements should be the norm for workplaces in Singapore. So this includes things such as working from home 3 days a week. And the study also found that workers have better psychological well-being when their current workplace arrangements match what they prefer to do. So I think with all these findings, it means that companies should give more consideration to employees' needs when deciding on their future work arrangements so that they have better work-life harmony. Some workers even said that they would consider looking for another job if their employer required them to return to the office on most days. So I think in conclusion, more can be done to support staff in achieving work and personal goals concurrently. There should also be more progressive practices and structures in workplaces, especially as the pandemic made people reconsider their possibilities, such as being able to work and also travel or take care of their families. And this has also highlighted the importance of psychological well-being as people continue to work.
In other news, prices are rising faster than expected, with core inflation climbing by 2.9% last month to a 10-year high. Inflationary pressures have intensified in recent weeks, driven by more expensive food and services. Including accommodation and private transport costs, headline inflation rose by 5.4%. In sports, Takayuki Nishigaya has been appointed the new national men's football coach on a 2-year contract. The 48-year-old will take charge of the Lions for the Asian Cup qualifiers in June. Similar to his predecessor, Tatsuma Yoshida, Nishigaya has no prior experience as an international coach. Overseas, MACRON has been re-elected as President of France after convincing victory over far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. In his victory speech, Mr. Macron, who portrays himself as a centrist, promised to heal the deep divisions in the country. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has made a top-secret trip to Ukraine to hold talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky. It's the highest-level American visit to the country since the Russian invasion. Washington also announced more military assistance for Ukraine and the nomination of a new U.S. ambassador. All signs are pointing to Malaysians voting for a new government this year rather than in 2023 when the current parliament ends its term. It will be the first election since 2018 when Malaysians voted for a change of government for the first time in history, overturning the Barisan Nasional coalition which had been in power for more than 60 years. Since then, the country has lurched from one political crisis to another, featuring a series of infighting, horse trading, and even switching of parties between politicians. And observers are expecting more of this in the months to come. Joining us from Kuala Lumpur is our Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teo. Shannon, how are the parties getting ready for the 15th general election, or otherwise known as GE15? And is Barisan Nasional poised to make a comeback?
It looks really good for Barisan Nasional now, doesn't it? And that's why you're seeing UMNO leaders, specifically those who are aligned with President Zahid Hamidi, aligned with the ex-Prime Minister Najib Razak, pushing for elections to happen as early as possible so they can capitalize on the momentum that they have. We've seen that they've won the last 2 state elections in Johor and Melaka by more than a 2/3 majority. So they believe that things are looking up for the UMNO-led Barisan Nasional. But if you dive down into the math, you actually find that what BN actually won was 40% of the vote. And in most of the contests, it was split either 3 ways or more than that. And now the parties who are not Barisan Nasional, I mean Perikatan Nasional and Pakatan Harapan, there is a thinking that if they had joined up together, well, then they have about 60% of the vote, and then they would win most of the contests instead. So what the other parties are trying to do now is try to find a way to work together that is still acceptable to their grassroots support, still acceptable to their voters. Now, I say this because ideologically speaking, there is quite a fair gap. You have, for example, in Pakatan Harapan, a secularist party, the Democratic Action Party, and you have in Perikatan Nasional, the Islamist party, PAS, right? And they have very different viewpoints about how to run the country. There are also personality clashes. We have Tan Sri Muhyiddin, the former Prime Minister, who leads Perikatan Nasional, and Anwar Ibrahim, who leads Pakatan Harapan, and they have clashed before over who should have succeeded Mahathir Mohamad as Prime Minister in 2020. So we have all these separate personality issues as well, aside from the ideological issues. So the parties are basically, they understand what the math is on the ground, right? They understand that. But how do you sell the narrative to your voters and to your support base? That's going to be the important watch point in the next coming months.
Shannon, officially the next general election must be held by September 2023, that is next year. But all signs are pointing to an election this year. Tell us why.
Well, as we mentioned before, there's a segment in UMNO that believes that we should have it as soon as possible. We have the momentum with us. We don't want the other parties to re-strategize, to find a way to beat us. They are in disarray. They don't know what to do. We've been winning landslide victories, so they want to push forward and have the election as soon as possible. However, this doesn't suit the existing Prime Minister, Ismail Sabri Yaakob. Now, he's an UMNO Vice President, and he wants to stay in power, obviously. But what the President of UMNO wants is that they want to have an election as soon as possible. They believe they can dominate Malaysian politics again the way they have before 2018 when they lost the last general election. And so he wants to have an election as soon as possible. So now we're looking at a timeline between August, September, October, around there, after a confidence and supply agreement with the opposition expires. Now, that's crucial because under that CSA, the confidence and supply agreement, Parliament is not supposed to be dissolved before July 31st. Right? It can only be dissolved after that. And part of this agreement is to ensure that it was a way to ensure that there was political stability, enough stability so that we can have, we can pass the budget, we can agree on major legislative issues. Now, that's it, right? So one half of UMNO wants it to happen by the third quarter of this year, before the end of the year. But the Prime Minister appears to want it to extend a bit longer. He wants a longer runway to prepare himself, to burnish his image, to show that he is a good Prime Minister and that the people and his own party should return him as Prime Minister after the next election. We understand that he's basically looking at a window after Chinese New Year next year. That means February onwards, right? And that brings us pretty much to the last 6 months of the existing term for Parliament. So once we go into 2023, then it's any time now, right? So what we are looking at, what observers, what reporters are looking at is either it happens in that August to October kind of window. If not, then it's going to be next year, because by the time you reach October or November, it's time to present another budget, right, for 2023. And most governments will feel that being able to present a new budget is a way to sell your promises to voters and to entice them to support you for the next term.
Shannon, thank you for your perspectives, Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teo. For more on what to expect if Malaysia goes to the polls this year, you'll find our coverage online at str.sg/Asia. Our team in Malaysia, led by Shannon, has been looking at how the different parties are stacking up. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.